Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I am joined today by someone I've known for many years personally as a friend. Raina Munson is the owner of The Secret Door, a wellness space in Morgan Hill, California. And I have always admired you, Raina, for being such a smart, intelligent woman who you're the kind of woman that I want to bottle up some of your confidence and take it for myself. And you're just amazing. And you always speak so articulately and so passionately. And, a lot of us right now are just recently becoming enlightened to what's happening in the world. And I feel like you woke up on the enlightened side of the bed a long time ago. So I'm really excited to chat with you and get your perspective. So tell me a little bit about The Secret Door and what led you to start that, and what are the kinds of services you offer there?
Okay, thank you first so much for having me, Mariah. It's fantastic to be here. The Secret Door is a wellness space. I am a master Reiki practitioner, a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and a holistic life coach. So that is where I take my clients, but we also have a retail space where we sell everything from crystal and mineral specimens to salt lamps to jewelry, candles, incense, everything to clean and elevate the environment that you reside in, work in, play in, and just things to keep you in a really clear-headed and balanced and aligned energetic position. And I came to this work later in life, probably about 7 years ago. I started kind of questioning, okay, what's my next step? My children were getting older. They were in high school, getting ready to go into high school. And I wanted to prepare myself for what was going to come next. I've been married for a long time, and my husband is pretty well established in his career. And it was time for me to kind of make my final, what am I going to be when I grow up, a plan. And I've always been kind of just naturally, I guess, someone that people feel comfortable speaking to about issues, plans, ideas, just things in general. And in that vein, I started to kind of explore what made me happy, what things made me feel most fulfilled about my previous career in the corporate marketing sector. And it was really, it really all came down to just being of service, helping others, utilizing what I now recognize through a lot of self-work and introspection is my gift. I am an empath and an intuitive. So what I used to, coming from the ego side, believe was my vast intellect and my my fantastic ability to dole out advice, I started to connect to on a different level and really revere as a gift that I'm able to connect with people on an intimate, energetic level that helps them to reveal things that they may not have been able to glean themselves, that they maybe were struggling with and never really looked at outside of themselves, and were able to kind of examine with some different perspectives. So I started about 7 years ago in my Reiki journey, and Reiki is a fantastic energetic modality. It works on the 7 core chakra systems in the body. But if you're familiar with chakras, some people feel that you can go through the 8th to the 14th in the etheric realm, and some people think you can elevate all the way to the 114th chakra. But I mainly concentrate on those 7, from root, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and crown. That's where a lot of the work begins and ends for most people, unless you are going to get very, very deep into a high spiritual practice. So I feel that if you can create a mind, body, spirit connection and alignment, bring some balance, and help people to heal old traumas, old wounds, old hurts, so that they can move forward with a very open, clean, and present energy, it really improves their quality of life, their work-life balance. Pretty much everything that follows from there is going to be improved. So that's kind of the basis and background in which I came to the work. And now it's just kind of growing and evolving. And I've actually this year been doing quite a bit of public speaking, which is something that I really was intentional about coming into 2020, wanting to kind of get into an effective communication style that would allow people from all backgrounds to connect to this type of healing work and this type of energetic balance that I've achieved for myself and still work to achieve every day. And I'm slowly helping friends and family and my client circle work through as well.
I love that. And I love that you said about different backgrounds. I think that, at least in my experience growing up, specifically communities of color, talking about mental health is kind of taboo. You're not, there's this toxic masculinity that happens, and it's, a sign of weakness. And I don't think we're taught at a young age how important it is. And one positive I've seen come out of quarantine and COVID is, we're forced to sit with ourselves at home and our families, and you have to think about your mental health. How has your business adjusted during this time? Are you still working with your clients from afar? Are there practices that you work with them over the phone or through Zoom, things like that?
Yes, actually, before COVID, I had no real online presence. It's a brick and mortar space. I saw my clients in person for the majority. I do have some clients that are out of state that I see through Skype, but for the probably lion's share, I'd say 95% or more, all of my business was in person in the brick and mortar retail side, and then one-to-one for seeing all of my clients. And with the advent of COVID, I actually had just previously to us going into the shelter in place been introduced to a fantastic web designer, and it kind of seemed kismet that I had just recently met her, and I had heretofore been really concentrating on starting a website, but we built the website out, and I started to host Zoom classes, and I started to be able to see my clients on a broader range of services, not just clinical hypnotherapy, not just life coaching. I also was able, because I am a master level practitioner, utilize my Reiki and use the distance abilities that come with that advanced work. And I've been really fortunate in that I've been able to maintain my one-to-one client appointments throughout COVID for everyone who's comfortable working from distance. And I think it was really critical timing to be able to utilize the shelter in place to pivot in that way. Being adaptable, being agile, being fluid is really difficult sometimes because you really get married to an outcome. You've kind of planned things out. You want to do things, especially if you're meticulous about planning things quarterly, you kind of have things on the board for the next 4, 8, 12 months. You really don't think something like this is going to happen that really pulls the rug out. And having the ability to open up and do things online, and being able to host webinars and do things via Skype and Zoom has really broadened my client base, has broadened my reach, has opened my perspective on what is an effectual way to do this work, because before I was very connected to, in a visceral way, doing the work hands-on, person to person. And I have really been able to see the efficacy of doing the work in groups, in large groups. People from all over the world have been able to dial into these calls, and getting that perspective and sharing that energetic signature has really elevated my work. And I'm so grateful. I know it's not popular to say that, you're happy about things that came out of COVID, but if we have to be in that artificial stasis, you kind of want to emerge with new wings. So I'm really excited about what's coming next. And I've been doing quite a bit more public speaking, especially around the critical mass of police brutality protest and activism that's really been kind of coming to the fore in the last few weeks. I've spoken at a couple of NAACP rallies and such. So it's been a really busy time, even though it's been a very contemplative time as well.
That's great. Yeah, I follow all your posts on Facebook. They're, like you say, this quote I pulled from your website. You say, "I deliver all my coaching and energy work with a healthy dose of common sense, kick in the pants practicality." And I love that, because I think that's what we need right now. I think that we've spent too much time sugarcoating things and not seeing things as they are. So I
Right.
really love that that's the way that you speak and that's your approach, and kudos to you for all of the work that you're doing in the community.
Yeah.
What role do you think mental health plays in what's happening right now, and how can it help us to
Um,
move forward?
well, just to even address the mental stress, trauma, PTSD that people of color have been experiencing, going through the trauma of having family and friends being brutalized by people that you should be able to rely upon for protection and service, has been critical. Recognizing that it is traumatic, recognizing that it does have lasting effects, recognizing that even before we started to believe that it was affecting us, we've gotten studies that say it's affecting children as young as 3 and 4. Children
Mm-hmm.
who should identify with the police as the good guys are already starting to realize that there's a disconnect, that mommy and daddy get nervous when the police are behind me and are expressing and emoting and verbalizing their awareness that there is some kind of barrier to their relationship to the police. And for us as a community and people of color, there is a very long and traumatic history of over policing, of overzealous use of force, of inherent bias. And it is very traumatizing. It creates, even in myself, who I'm 45 years old, I'm not in any typical identifiable group that the police would have heightened interest in. But even myself, when I'm driving, if a police officer gets behind me and I'm not speeding, or I'm not, my tags are all up to date, I should not have that momentary fear of, uh-oh, what is this going to, elevate into? And I know a lot of people of color operate in that space. And being someone who's never been arrested, never been in trouble with the law, has always tried to be conscientious and signing the social contract and adhering to those rules that keep society cohesive and amicable, and making life, a journey of light and not dark. It is very seriously and inherently impactful to realize, if I'm feeling that way at 45 and babies are feeling that way at 3 and 4, how are we feeling in the intervening years? How are young men feeling who are mostly targeted? How is it affecting all of us? And what is the pathology that is going to follow you throughout life, when you've got to learn at a very early age that you've got to fend for yourself. You're on your own, and you've got to learn to navigate that in a way that allows you to get home safely and allows you to process that trauma and not become angry and embittered and, at counterproductive, energetic spaces for your own life and your own well-being. So the mental health part of that is incredibly important. We are starting to talk about having these large group youth-based mentorship programs where we allow young people to give voice to those emotions and give them a place to kind of purge that and fill themselves back up with something else. And the youth, the activation, the call to activism, their readiness, their willingness to be of service is fantastic. I have been floored. And it's not just people of color, it is everyone across the board. When I'm standing up on that stage, speaking to the people and looking out at the literal evidence of the sea change that we're all experiencing, we're all witnessing, because it's not just one group, one type, one age, one socio-economic background. It's everyone from everywhere. Everyone is tired of it. Enough is enough. Everyone is ready to rally around Not One More, because this is traumatizing, not just for the victims, but for the witnesses. Everyone that's seen that video has been altered in ways they can never shake, they can never deny, and they can never go back to. So I'm looking forward to a lot of seismic changes in the way that jurisprudence is meted out in this country, that policing is handled, that community activism is received, and I'm excited about the way forward. But yes, mental health is a huge, huge part of that healing, and being in a capacity that is not specifically therapeutic in a traditional way, but introducing a more spirit-based and spirit-led opportunity for people to move forward from pain instead of going back into it, I think is an incredible honor.
Mm, I love that. I spent a lot of time this weekend watching documentaries and educating myself about the past. And one thing that has just struck me is how we continually repeat history. What is different about now, and what needs to happen, in your opinion, to not continue to repeat the mistakes of our past? Is it that, like you said, there are people of all backgrounds and diversity and colors and, you know, ethnic backgrounds coming and joining forces and becoming allies? Is there something different now that you're feeling compared to the past? And what is it that we need to do collectively as a society to make sure that this doesn't continue?
Well, absolutely. I do feel that this is a very vastly different response than we've ever had in the past to something like this. I see communities, I see citizens rallying, protesting, being very intentional, being very direct and focused in what they'd like to see happen, having a very specific set of demands around defunding the militarization of the police. And I think what people need to do is be very careful about getting carried away with little sound bites and headlines. When people are asking to defund the police, it's not a disbandment of police. It is ratcheting down the militarization aspect of the way people are being policed. Police officers should not have army tactical weapons and tanks in order to police American citizens. They should not be a militarized Gestapo in the midst of the American civilian public. They are supposed to be peace officers. They are here to serve and protect us. They should not be deployed as a weapon or a cudgel against us. So it's time for us to recognize that there is sentiment change. There's kind of a changing of the guard. There is a dying off of old elements and people that were more grounded in oppression than these children. Like, I look at my own children at 18 and 20, and they are so savvy, so connected, so fearless, and very motivated. And I'm so proud to see these young people in their late teens, early 20s, who are very articulate in what they'd like to see and very demanding in not allowing people to overlook or misdirect from their messaging. So it's fantastic to see that. I think that's a huge difference. I think when you look at the television and watch the protest, you see the difference in that it's a completely, a completely diverse ethnic makeup. It's all ages. It is all, religious backgrounds. You see the clergy and the rabbi and the imam all, in lockstep and arms, akimbo. It's fantastic. It's so energizing. I remember at the same type age as my children in 92, that's the year I graduated. That's the year of the King verdict. And I remember being outraged and protesting and being at rallies, and the scale of what's happening now, it's a multiplicity I can't even identify. The response is so much bigger. It's so much more widespread. We've had protests in every state in the nation and across the globe. There are other countries that have taken up the rallying cry of not one more. And that's just, really the biggest difference is that everyone is tired. It's not just us screaming out for help in frustration. It is a chorus of voices that are calling for the end to over militarized policing and overzealous uses of, lethal force. And that's what we're seeing, is that has been determined to be an untenable and unconscionable way in which to interact with the public. And that is a fantastic thing to witness.
Mm, it is. It really is. I love that chorus of voices. I'm going to keep that one in
Yeah.
my head. Speaking of your children, you have raised two amazing, a son and a daughter. They're amazing.
Yeah.
I see all of their accomplishments on Facebook. How have you, what have you done throughout their lives to instill, like you said, they're fearless? How have you educated them on what's happening in the world, and because it is the youth that are going to continue pushing this cause forward and make next generation better than how we've made it. What, as a parent, how do you raise children that are strong and fearless and advocate like your children do?
I think the first way we did it is in being very transparent. When they ask questions about, why are those people upset? What's happening? Why are we angry with the police? We had to stop and say, we're not angry with the police. We're angry with members of the police force that are not doing their job properly. Mm-hmm. You have to speak to children at whatever level they are, and you have to have an ability to communicate truth without scarring them or taking the light out of their eyes. I never gave my children more truth than they could handle at the time, but I never sugarcoated or falsified anything to them, because they have to be citizens of the world. And in order for them to be effective and in touch with reality, you have to ground them in such. If you romanticize and fantasize and infantilize your children by speaking to them in ways that don't employ and magnify and give them agency, I think you cripple them. And I never did that. I didn't even really speak to my children with baby talk. From the very moment that I gave birth, I just related to them as humans. And we began to communicate very effectively, very early. My children both were very verbal at very young ages. Clearly, I'm a talker. I'm a communicator. So all that happens in this house is talking and communication. So we talked a lot. And I always, whatever we were watching, whatever was happening around them, whatever they were experiencing with peers in school and sports, whatever life lessons they were learning, we always try to employ examples of, when things didn't go well, how could we have done that differently? What could you have done from the beginning of this issue, and what changes in attitude or action could have given you the outcome that you wanted? Because I wanted to arm them with tools to understand how to move in the world and be individual, and also be part of a community and be part of the human family, have empathy and compassion, conviction, and be completely engaged in life at whatever juncture of life they were at. My children were active in sports. They were active in school activities. I was the same. I always encouraged them to be a voice, especially if you feel like something's unfair, if your friend is experiencing something, if you're witnessing something, if you see something, say something. I always armed my children with a sense of responsibility for themselves and others. It is your responsibility. My children were identified as gifted very early, and I had to kind of offset that to make sure that they don't develop any elitist attitudes. I'm better than because I'm identified. You want to make sure your children are well-rounded in every spectrum of life, and not just gilding the lily and telling them they're so great. Oh, you're so terrific as an athlete, or you're so mentally intelligent, or you're so, physically gifted in that you've been given a healthy body and good, strong bones and a wonderful mind. So you are somehow going to be protected from the things that happen to people that don't get those beautiful and wonderful gifts at birth. And that's something that we in this house and in my family have always been aware of. There's no amount of education, there's no amount of money, there's no amount of Brooks Brothers suits and wingtip shoes that can legislate you out of your Blackness, out of your humanness, out of your capacity to show compassion and love for others. And so we always wanted to create, good citizens. And, we travel. It's been a wonderful blessing to see my children matriculate through school and learn other languages and go to other countries and have an appreciation for their culture and be able to speak to people in their native tongue and see the difference and respect that people afford you when you take the time to learn and be aware of what happens outside of your own, four walls at home. So I think that's huge in creating children who can, adapt and be adaptable and be easy to work with and easy to learn next to and play sports with, because they understand that the I of being in the moment is fantastic, but the we of accomplishment is just as great, so that they're not always looking to in some way elevate or differentiate themselves above the whole.
Well, good job to you and Kent. I have hope for the future. When I look at kids like yours, I hope that there are more of them in the world.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you.
Of course. So there's a lot of uncomfortable conversations happening on the internet, in person. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of hate. What advice do you have for all of us who are facing ourselves really and our unconscious biases, and like you mentioned earlier, getting away from our ego so that we can be better and do better? And how do we have these conversations with ourselves and with others in a respectful way and not an angry way that is counterproductive?
Well, I think you first have to identify and connect to your empathy and find out if you're in a dearth of empathy. If your first reaction to people protesting is, oh, they're rioting, they're looting. If your main concern is for loss of property and not loss of life, if your main concern is that there may be some interruption in, the supply chain because people are protesting in the streets because another human being's been murdered, you need to check where that's coming from, because you need to be able to mirror yourself outside of yourself and place yourself on the ground in that man's position. And if you can't ever see that happening to you, that lets you know there's something going on inside of you that doesn't allow you to connect to people on a very one-to-one, person-to-person, human-to-human level. And I think that is the best place to start to examine, well, what is my bias? What makes me think that I'm prevented from being in that very same position? Is it because I think that could never happen to me as a woman, as a white man, as an Asian person, as a Latino, whatever makes you look at a citizen unarmed, being restrained with handcuffs, face down on the hot concrete, being murdered. If you don't connect to that in a real visceral way and have some horror at the fact that that's being done in America, I think that's the best place to start. I think for me, one of the things that has been a prevailing kind of theme is reframing my thought patterns and trying to help the people around me reframe my thoughts. If the first thing that comes to mind in a time like this is something specific to you as opposed to the greater good, then you need to work. There's some work that you need to do. If it's talking about, damaged property or the inability to conduct business when someone has lost their life, there is a scale that's not calibrated properly. And I think you need to kind of go inside and examine, when did I decide that a human life is less valuable than commerce, a day's commerce, a week's commerce, however long it takes for change to occur? How many lives have to be lost before I count it as important enough to establish a stopgap and say, okay, this is the baseline at which, is it 100? Is it 1,000? Is it 1,000,000? Because people have been literally dying for decades at the hands of the police. And I think another thing we have to do is not make this a black versus white issue. It is not. This is a human versus brutality issue. We are human. We are all part of the human family. And we should all be appalled when someone in authority is acting outside of the doctrine of their job. You have an awesome responsibility when you become a police person. And I have extreme respect and reverence for anyone who is of service. So it's not about having disrespect for the police. I was raised in a very military family. Both my father and stepfather served, my grandfather, my uncles. We were never given any license to have disdain for the military, for the police, for the flag, for any of those things. My family is plus 10 generations. So as far back as we can actually track, we've been in this nation. We've built this nation. We've done it with, at a great loss. At a great loss of many lives, of many dollars, and a lot of personal power. And it's time for us to be all on a level playing field. And it starts with legislation. There can be no amount of favor for any group above another. And until we get to that place, we have to continue forward with the fight to finally gain equality, for this country to finally live out the credo, for us to finally all be recipient of the beautiful words that were penned by our founding fathers. Those words ring true, because even though those men were not grounded in the truth, because some of them were slave owners, some of them didn't believe women were their equal, some of them may have been LGBTQIA, and they were not accepting of that. But just because a person is not grounded in truth doesn't mean the truth can't come out of them, can't come through them. I sat here and watched these pundits trying to talk. I listened to the gentleman who's going to be tried for that man's murder, Officer Chavin. His actual attorney said, well, if everyone was so horrified by watching him kill this man, why didn't they intervene? And I think that is at the very basic level exactly what we're fighting for. We should not, as civilians, have to police the police. If they can't be trusted to act upon their mandate in a way that is non-lethal and non-threatening and not harmful, then we need to do incredible work to completely tear down and rebuild the entirety of the police state in America. And I feel like that's kind of what people are realizing. When you hear people start to talk about defunding the police, that is something that would have been anathema even 5 years ago. So I think there's a lot of conversation, a lot of opinions are being swayed and changed. I think people are responding to the casual and dispassionate way in which this man was killed in such numbers and in such passionate ways, because it was literally unbelievable to watch. People were screaming. He was screaming for his life, and he was ignored. And that can't happen. That is completely at odds and completely outside the doctrine of what it means to be a free person in America. And I think that we need to get back to a place where everyone has an opportunity to prove their innocence. If he had committed a crime, no one is saying the police should not adjudicate their job. If someone commits a crime, yes, arrest them and detain them and jail them and allow them to go to trial with an attorney and plead their case and have that case heard by a jury of their peers. And if they're found guilty, then let them serve out that time frame in a humane and an equal way to the crime that they've committed. But you cannot have people getting 7x sentences for the same crime. There's got to be some continuity. There's got to be some consistency. There's got to be some equality in the way that justice is meted out. And unfortunately, right now, it is completely lopsided. People are getting away with literal murder, and it's got to stop, because it is, even though it may not be someone who looks like you, it's still damaging. Everyone who witnessed that was changed, was altered. Anyone who sees something like that, whether it's happening to someone that looks like you or not, if you are a human being with compassion and empathy, that should very seriously affect the way you live in the world. And if it doesn't, that is where we need to start. That is where we need to start. Why don't we see one another as humans? And if you see each other as human, why don't you see each other as equal? Because what I want for myself is no more and no less than what I want for everyone. I don't want any favors. I don't need any handouts. I just want the ability to move through life uninhibited, unhindered, untethered, because that is the problem. If you're given the ability to matriculate through school without inherent bias, we are very aware that studies show that there is a point in which students start to have disparity. When children are studied from the beginning of school till 3rd grade, they're all in a pretty similar pool. But 3rd, 4th grade, children of color are starting to be handled differently. They're punished more harshly. Teachers don't give them as many chances. You're not given the same benefit of the doubt. You're not afforded the same opportunities. And that's when you start to see test scores and other things become divergent. So it's very, for me, very serious that we begin to break some of these institutions down and rebuild them in better ways. Some of these things that we have control over. We don't have control over nature, but we absolutely control nurture. And if we can get to a point where all children are afforded the same ability to learn and to earn, then you won't have these kinds of disparities where there's, inordinate numbers of people of color that are jailed. This nation jails more people than any other country on the planet. And that doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't go to jail for 50 or 60 years for a nonviolent crime. That doesn't make any sense. There are men who have lost the entirety of their lives in prison. Men who could have been leaders of industry, men that could have, and women. There's an entire generation of children that are parentless. Either their father or their mother has been incarcerated for decades. They have gone through so many cycles of life. And if you did not commit a crime that ended in serious injury or death, I don't think a life sentence is just. So those are things that we can examine. Those are things that we can affect. Those are things that we can control immediately. And I think you would see immediate turnaround and immediate change. But first, we've got to start. We've got to get to the point where we actually acknowledge those disparities. we have to acknowledge those biases, and we're finally getting there.
I could talk to you all day. This is like a therapy session for me. Thank you so much. But I will end with one last question. I want to circle back to the mental health discussion. I think that right now is a very emotionally charged time. And at least I know for me, last week by Friday, I was just in tears and overwhelmed and drained. I don't want to shut off because I want to continue to be educated and see what's happening. For those of us that aren't trained in Reiki or hypnotherapy or even have never done meditation, what are some daily practices that we can do to take care of our mental health so that we can continue moving forward and not become so emotionally drained that we just feel hopeless and counterproductive? What are some things that you recommend from your expertise?
So the first thing I start with anybody that I'm working with, I want them to become conscious of their breathing. I think breath work is so incredibly important. I think it is so essential to just taking a little beat and just connecting with self and just checking in and just moving through your body, just inhaling a deep breath, holding it for 5 or 6 beats, and then exhaling, pulling that air in. And as you're doing it, just identifying what you're doing, that you're giving life to self, that you are giving yourself the ability to function, to be present in your body, recognizing any kind of things that feel out of place or out of whack, giving yourself a moment to really just sit in self in silence and quiet. And it can be done at any time, anywhere, without any tools or training. But yes, just breathing, just being conscious of breathing though. I think sometimes we're like, well, we breathe all the time, but a lot of times your breathing is shallow. Your breathing is not something you're connecting to. It's not intentional. And if you just sit and just really feel the air coming in, taking it in, pulling it down into the lowest part of your lungs, fully inflating them, feeling your diaphragm in and out, pulling in, exhaling, feeling all of the care for self that just taking a deep cleansing breath can do. Just that moment. And then if you do a series of them and then deepening that and holding for longer, pulling in and really sitting in that space and the expansion of not only your physical self, but of your energetic self. That happens when you can take a very deep cleansing, self-reflective, contemplative breath and then releasing it. So breath is the first thing always. That's a huge one. Also, being mentally in tune with your physical self. Sometimes we take on so much and we're so busy being that we're working and taking care of the family and moving through life, and we're not even conscious of our physical body. And we're feeling pain, we're tired, we're not our best, we're not operating at 100%. Just doing small things, self-care things, taking a longer shower, taking a bath instead of a shower, lighting a candle, having something pleasant. Like I love crystals, so having a beautiful crystal that I can hold and sit with in meditation, listening to music. There's so much we can do, and it costs you nothing, and is not about having this deep spiritual practice. It's just about being consciously aware of self and then expanding outward from yourself to your friends and family and your coworkers. If you're in an environment where things are charged and emotional, just saying, hey, let's just take 5 seconds of quiet. Let's just be quiet for a moment and let's all collect ourselves. And just holding that space for one another to allow ourselves to feel our feelings and express them in ways that may be uncomfortable and may be not what we normally would do in work environments, or this is something you can't escape. So people are having difficult conversations on social media, at work, with friends and family, you know, just out in the world. And we have to be able to hold space for that. We have to be open to receive divergent schools of thought, messaging that may not be in lockstep with your own. We cannot emerge from this a better people if we don't hear everyone. And there's room for everyone, even those who disagree with your methodology, even those that have completely different ideology. There's room for all of us. And when we listen to everyone and we have a collaborative and cohesive and productive conversation, we are all the better for it. So yeah, absolutely, with mental health, taking time for self, taking a moment for self-care, being conscious of your breathing, you know, taking a moment to check in with your physical body. You know, if I need more sleep, I'm exhausted, I'm running on fumes. Give yourself permission to take care of yourself. Just like when you're in an airplane, they tell you, put on your air mask first in the case of any emergency, and then help everyone around you. And that's the same thing you've got to do in life. Take care of yourself first, and then you can be of service to those around you. You can't pour from an empty vessel.
Yes, and I think as women particularly, we're nurturing and we want to take care of everyone first. And it's, you know, like you said, you can't care for others if you're not fulfilled and full of life and healthy.
Right.
So thank you for that. I'm going to focus more. And it's interesting because we, like you said, breathing is just something, I mean, we have to breathe to stay alive, but it's something that's so difficult when you sit and you focus on it. But it's something that's so important. Well, thank you so much, Raina. I want to acknowledge you for being a business owner. I think that's amazing, and congratulations on your business. And I want to acknowledge you for using your voice to help others and to spread your message and your good vibes. And I really appreciate you holding space for me today. And I just thank you so much. I'm so honored to have spent this time with you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate both you and your sister for including me in this fantastic series. I thank you for being a conscientious business owner. I thank you for being an invested woman of color who is in the community, working for the community and with the community for the betterment of all people. It's a wonderful thing to see. I'm so proud of you. I thank you for giving me this time. If anyone is interested in checking us out, they can go to thesecretdoormh.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at thesecretdoormh. You can contact me directly at 408-316-5587 or via email at raina@thesecretdoor.io. Thank you for giving me the shameless plug. And you guys have a fantastic rest of the week. And I just pray so much prosperity and abundance and fulfillment over your venture. And I'm looking forward to all the wonderful things that you guys are going to do.
Thank you, Raina. I will share all of that information. And thank you again. Say hello to the family for me.
I will, and please do the same.
I will. Bye, Raina. Thank you so much. Bye.
You're so welcome. Bye-bye.